that one of the things in those times, there's been really an enormous change in the culture generally and in American society about how gay and trans people participate and are viewed. I mean, it's really one of the big social changes of our time, and I think that it's your time and bringing it back, you know, now, how you kind of see those changes.
Well, he was a member of, I remember, Queer Nation. We came of age during AIDS. Being gay was life or death. You know, it was just part of, and it was scary, it was exciting, it was, you know, it felt weird if he didn't come out, because it felt, there was something wrong when people were dying to be in the closet. I don't know. You know, and there was a lot of homophobia. I remember somebody, I was always open, but I didn't not get jobs because I was gay, but I remember it being in the air and people telling me I couldn't be out, you know, and rock and roll, there was still a kind of, you know, sure, yeah. You know, it was kind of less cool to say something anti-gay, but it was definitely, there was homophobia in the business. And we were just so mad, you know, there was a lot of anger, and it was just, and I was being told what to do, and I hated that, and I'd wear my silence equals death pin at, you know, my MacGyver audition or whatever. I don't know why. But you know, interestingly, Hedwig would not have happened without that pin. The film wouldn't, because I went in an audition for a film in the 80s called Book of Love, directed by Bob Shea, who ran New Line Cinema. And I was reading the script, and I hadn't had a chance to read it. It was really homophobically written character, and I walked into the audition, I was like, what am I doing? And they're like, what do you think of the script? And I was like, it's really homophobic. And it was like, usually you wouldn't go in if you felt that way, but I was already there, and I was like, they were like, it's homoerotic. I was like, it begins with homo, but it's a different word. And, you know, and I explained, but you know, there wasn't a lot of sensitivity to stereotype versus other, you know, and you could make fun of, you should be able to use stereotype, but once everyone is cool with their civil rights or whatever, I don't know. Because there's a variety of human experience, but this was a very narrow one, and I said, well, you know, he's got this stupid S&M joke, and then there's this pedophile joke, and it's all these really stupid gay things that are, you know, Jerry Falwell would agree with. And they were like, you know, you're right. It was a small character, we hadn't thought about it, and how would you like to do the role, you know, if we rewrite it? You know, so I did it, and years later, Bob Shea came to see Hedwig off Broadway when it was cool, you know, and Mike DeLuca, and they were in tears, and they were just like, we want to make this movie with you. So Bob, since then, was always like respectful of me to tell him what I thought, and he's like, I want to make this with you. And I just saw him last week, and he had seen the show last weekend, and he was in tears, and I was like, thanks, Bob, you know. And so saying what you think when you're a little scared, not to offend, but to just make it a little clearer, you know, can't hurt. You know, if the person doesn't express it or accept it well, you don't need to work with them. You really don't. But a little constructive engagement. And
did you find when you were doing it at the Jane Street, when it was hip,
yeah,
that you were dealing with weird homophobia, transphobia stuff? Was it more like a sort of quote-unquote freak show environment at that time, or not so much?
I don't think so. I remember at Squeezebox that
it's cool to be gay because Clinton had just been elected.
But I remember when we were at Squeezebox and there was a sign on the door, you know, because anyone could go to the club and it was a fun night, so straight people wanted to come. But there was a sign on the door that said, you know, this is a gay club and everyone is welcome. But if you're not cool with it, you know, get the fuck out. And you know, and every once in a while, you know, straight people would come in and they would be offended, and Mistress Formica would just go after them from the stage. Ooh. And you know, so that at that time there was, but I don't think that we had quite.
I remember friends saying you're committing career suicide.
When we were talking to a company that wanted to produce, before Killer, a different company that wanted to produce the film, and they had a record label, and the woman who ran the record label suggested to my manager, Steve, who's sitting over there, that, and this is her words, and so I'm not slandering anybody or whatever, but she said, and you know, if Steven wants, we can get him a girlfriend like they do for Leonardo DiCaprio.
I don't know what that means.
I understand. And so
That's a misstatement on so many levels.
yes, but she's also introduced herself by saying that
So that Brazilian model who was at your house that time, it all makes sense.
Gorgeous.
But I asked that because for doing it currently, there are and there have been so many examples and markedly vibrant examples of people who are very political, people who are very camp, people who are, you know, RuPaul's Drag Race is on currently and amazing. And so even just that the fun side of it is all over. Amazing Race and Eurovision. I mean, there's just so many examples of all of that to me, there's 0% of me in the performances at all concerned that it might be an awkward dynamic with them. And yet I'm performing to people who I think maybe, you know, phobic in some way.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you're dealing with like a majority, not a majority, a percentage of your audiences for a Broadway show tend to be wealthy, you know, Upper East Side couples that may have conservative views and may be kind of like living in their world and not been in the squeeze box environment.
Right.
And that, quite frankly, that's kind of my favorite thing about the show, is that it starts in a disparate way, and they're sitting next to kids who won the lottery, because we scatter them around and not just put them in the front 2 rows, and they're from totally different worlds. And by the end, when Hedwig is stripped down to nothing and is singing "Lift Up Your Hands" and kind of getting the point that you are complete in your fractured incompletion, that they're agreeing with it next to other people that they're totally nothing like at all.
Unless
There's
they're
a sense
sitting
of
next to
community.
Rex Reed, but
Rex Reed. Oh, Rex Reed. He's hated the show for years. He loves having been one of the first people to have hated it. And he couldn't wait not to be here tonight. But I love his quotes. They're so extreme. We were a pile of toxic swill.
deluded. Tone deaf should be burned.
Tone-deaf songs that should be burned. It's not even a good metaphor. And, they liked him.
No, they liked him before. Did he? Before. They don't like him now. The whole review was like gay on gay violence.
He said he was a nice-looking boy, and it's terrible what they made him do.
He was such a nice boy. He used to sing Sondheim. And now look what they've done to him. He eats a cigarette. No, that's true. He licks the floor.
It says it tastes like Kathy Griffin. Rex Reed.
Look what they made him do.
Is outraged. Have you seen Myra Breckenridge? There's an outrage.
That's just so
Not that
funny
we've
because
memorized that review.
I just think that's interesting.
that is the way to rise above.
You know, one of the things that changed.
I don't mean it in a way to rise above. I
yeah.
just think that if you sit through this show, you have to be so closed off and so unavailable in certain ways, because it ends in it. At least for me, I'm performing it, right? So it's different, but it just ends with a real sense of community.
Yeah.
That to hear that those are what you take from it has to either be a fully agendaed opinion or just an inability to be open to other ways of existing.
Or both, and a lot more besides. Not to criticize one of my fellow critics, but
No, of course not. Of course not.
I only read the
God
good
forbid.
reviews.
But his reaction was the sort of reaction that we got when we performed in Rosie O'Donnell. So that's something that's definitely changed. We could do Jane Street, but when we went on Rosie O'Donnell, she got hate mail like you wouldn't believe.
Wow.
And she got
And
resistance.
people referred to we can't. My daughter was home from school, and we thought, well, we're just going to watch Rosie O'Donnell, and you put that hideous thing, on the air, and I can't believe
Well, and now you've been on all of the networks. I mean, there is a sense that there is room within, the mainstream, whatever that might be, for this show and for this character and for these themes and ideas. And I think that does seem like a difference, that it did feel in 1996, 97, 98, that it was on the edge of something, and that it was, it had a kind of countercultural feeling.
We were on all these shows sort of spontaneously, which weren't. Rosie was completely supportive, like, forced the studio to let us on. They're like, we don't know if we can have a drag queen on daytime television. She's like, you've got a drag queen throwing a chair on Jerry Springer. You can't have a drag queen singing about love? I'm out of here. This was before she was out, and we were like, Rosie. And then on David Letterman's show, we did the sound check, and there was a voice from the booth that said, could you please not remove your wig during the song? I was like, but I removed my wig at this point in the song. Why? Please don't remove your wig during the song. And so I removed it after, and they cut it off, because they wanted people to think I was a woman.
Wow.
David Letterman.
They didn't want people to get confused.
No, and David wouldn't shake my hand.
Wow.
Not that we don't love David Letterman.
I love David Letterman.
But
I wanted to touch him.
I think that people are more interested in, are more open to talking about trans issues. Like at the time, the gay thing was at the cutting edge, and I think people are now talking about trans issues more.
Yeah.
And so those issues are much more to the forefront of the show in ways that I don't think that were even discussed. When
And I think
Trans versus drag versus gay.
society is just more apt to it. Speak up a little more. Yeah. Society. Sorry.
That's how you know you're at a New York Times event, by the way.
Oh, sorry. I don't know where my mic is.
Society has had more examples of becoming okay and accepting of people falling in love and different versions and variants therein. So that's made my job easier this go round, certainly, than having to have dealt with that.